The day I found fresh mountain lion tracks less than a mile from my research station, 8 years after the species was declared extinct, I understood that science doesn't always have the final word. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I've spent the last decade studying large predator ecology in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. I chose this region specifically because of what it represents: a massive, interconnected forest system stretching from Georgia to Maine, covering over 200,000 square miles of potential habitat. Habitat that, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, no longer contains eastern mountain lions. In 2011, after a 78-year review, the federal government officially declared Puma concolor couguar, the eastern cougar, extinct. The last confirmed specimen was killed in Maine in 1938. Since then, despite thousands of reported sightings across the eastern United States, not a single one has been verified with DNA evidence, confirmed photographs, or physical remains that prove a breeding population exists. The official narrative is clear. What people are seeing are western mountain lions, migrants from established populations in South Dakota, Nebraska, and Wyoming, occasionally wandering east. Young males dispersing in search of territory. Transients. Never staying. Never breeding. But the data I've been collecting tells a different story. It started 3 years ago, in November. I was hiking a ridgeline in the Monongahela National Forest, conducting camera trap surveys for black bears. The morning was cold, the ground covered in a thin layer of frost that made every track visible. And there, crossing a game trail at the head of a hollow, I found them. 4-toed prints. 3 distinct lobes on the heel pad. No claw marks. Stride length measuring 28 inches. Width of the track, 3.7 inches. Mountain lion. No question. But what struck me wasn't just finding the tracks. It was where they led. They didn't follow the ridge east or west, as a transient male would. They descended into the valley, moved through thick cover toward a creek bed, and then looped back through a series of game trails that suggested intimate knowledge of the terrain. This wasn't an animal passing through. This was an animal that lived here. I set up 6 camera traps in a 3-mile radius. Within 2 weeks, I had something. A photograph. Taken at 2:47 a.m. A tawny shape moving through laurel thickets. Low profile. Long tail. Muscular haunches. The image was grainy, the lighting poor, the angle imperfect. But it was there. And it wasn't alone. The reports started coming in once I quietly put the word out through local hunting clubs and farmer networks. People who'd seen things. People who'd stayed silent because they didn't want to be dismissed as crazy. There was Tom Bradshaw, a cattle farmer in Pocahontas County. He'd lost 2 calves in the spring of 2019. Found them both with their throats torn out. Drag marks leading up into the rocks. Whatever killed them was strong enough to haul a 300-pound calf uphill through dense brush. Fish and Wildlife said it was coyotes. But I've seen coyote kills my whole life. This wasn't coyotes. He showed me photos. The claw patterns on the hide. The way the neck had been gripped. The cache site where the second calf had been partially buried under leaves and branches. Classic cougar behavior. There was Linda Morrison, a schoolteacher from Elkins who'd been driving home from a parent-teacher conference in October 2020. It was just after sunset. I came around a bend on Route 33, and there it was, crossing the road maybe 50 feet ahead of me. I slammed on the brakes. It stopped in the middle of the pavement and turned its head to look at me. Long tail. Rounded ears. Tawny coat. It stared at me for maybe 5 seconds, then leapt off the road and disappeared into the forest. I sat there shaking for 10 minutes. She filed a report with the DNR. They told her it was probably a large dog or a bobcat. She never reported another sighting again, even though she saw it twice more on the same stretch of road over the next year. There was Marcus Webb, a bow hunter who'd been in a tree stand near Seneca Rocks when he heard something moving below him. I looked down and saw it walking directly beneath my stand. It stopped, sniffed the air, then looked up at me. We made eye contact. I've hunted my entire life, Doc. I know what a bobcat looks like. I know what a deer looks like. This was a mountain lion. No doubt in my mind. He didn't take a shot. He said it felt wrong. Like killing something that had been gone for too long and deserved a chance to come back. And then there were the older stories. The whispers from the 1970s and 80s. Loggers who'd seen tracks in remote clear-cuts. Hikers who'd heard screams in the night that sounded too human, too raw. Game wardens who'd found deer kills with signatures that didn't match any known predator in the region. One retired forester, a man named Eugene Tanner, told me his grandfather had killed a cougar in Tucker County in 1952. Never reported it. Buried it on his property. He said the state would have fined him or worse. But he knew what he'd shot. He kept the skull in a shed for 40 years. When he died, my grandmother burned it. Said it brought bad luck. I asked him if he believed the eastern cougar had ever truly gone extinct. He looked at me and said, "I think we stopped looking. And when you stop looking, things find ways to survive that you'll never understand." I submitted my findings to 3 peer-reviewed journals. All 3 rejected the paper. Not because the data was flawed, but because the conclusion was too speculative and lacked definitive genetic confirmation. I reached out to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They were polite but firm. Without DNA evidence, scat analysis, or verifiable photographic documentation showing breeding behavior, we cannot revise the extinction status. What you're likely documenting are Western transients. But the science doesn't fully support that explanation. Western mountain lions do occasionally disperse east. There have been confirmed cases in Connecticut, Michigan, even New York City. But these are isolated individuals. Young males traveling thousands of miles in search of territory. They don't establish home ranges. They don't breed. They move through and die or turn back. Yet the sightings I've documented show patterns of residency. Repeated appearances in the same locations. Evidence of territorial marking. Prey caches. Behavioral consistency that suggests not just presence, but establishment. I consulted Dr. Howard Quigley, a leading cougar biologist. He reviewed my data and admitted it was compelling but inconclusive. He said, "The challenge is that mountain lions are cryptic. They avoid humans instinctively. If there's a small, isolated population in the Appalachians, they could exist undetected for decades. But proving it requires finding them. And if they've survived this long without being found, they're either incredibly rare or incredibly good at hiding." There's also the genetic question. If eastern cougars still exist, are they the original subspecies, or are they hybrids, descendants of both eastern and western populations that interbred during westward expansion in the 1800s? Recent studies have shown that the genetic differences between eastern and western cougars were minimal to begin with. Some scientists now argue that the eastern cougar was never a true subspecies, just a regional population of the same animal. Which raises a haunting possibility. If mountain lions are returning to the east, are they reclaiming lost territory, or are they the ones that never truly left? It was late April. I'd been tracking a series of kills in the Cranberry Wilderness, 5 deer in 6 weeks, all within a 10-mile radius. The patterns were unmistakable. Throat strikes. Cached remains. Locations chosen for seclusion and elevation. I set up a trail camera near the most recent kill site, hidden in a laurel thicket on a north-facing slope. I checked it every 3 days. On the 4th check I had it. A photograph. Clear. Unambiguous. Taken at dawn. A female mountain lion. Standing on a rock ledge above the kill. Her coat golden in the early light. Her eyes alert, scanning the forest. Her body lean, muscular, adapted to the terrain. And behind her, barely visible in the shadows of the rocks, 2 cubs. Small. Maybe 8 weeks old. Their spots still faintly visible in the morning glow. I sat there in the dirt, staring at the camera screen, and I cried. Because this wasn't a transient. This wasn't a lone male wandering through. This was a family. A breeding population. A future. I didn't publish the photo. I didn't report the location. I deleted the GPS coordinates from my field notes. Because I realized something that day. Maybe the reason we declared them extinct wasn't because they were gone. Maybe it was because we needed them to be gone. Because their existence complicated our plans for the land, for development, for control. And maybe the greatest act of conservation I could commit wasn't proving they were here. It was letting them remain invisible. I still hike the Appalachians. I still find tracks. I still hear the stories. And every time someone tells me they saw a mountain lion, I don't dismiss them. I don't tell them it's impossible. I just nod. And I say, maybe you're right. Maybe they've been here all along. Because somewhere in these ancient mountains, in the shadows where the maps grow vague and the wilderness deepens, something is returning. Or maybe it never left. And perhaps the most important question isn't whether they're here. It's whether we're ready to share this land with them again. If they were declared extinct, why do the reports never stop?